Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to be taking notes on adding and subtracting vectors, as well as multiplying vectors by scalars. So our essential question today is, how do we add and subtract vectors, and how do we multiply vectors by scalars? Before we can do either of those things, we have to learn how to write a vector. We have two different ways to write vectors, and these two vectors here are the same vector. So the first one looks like a point, except it has these arrow-like brackets instead of the smooth parentheses. So number 3 tells us how far we're going in the x direction, -2 tells us how far we're going in the y direction, and 1 tells us how far we're going in the z direction. These vectors I, j, and k are another way of saying how far we're going in the x direction, how far we're going in the y direction, and how far we're going in the z direction. So 3i minus 2j plus k is the same vector as 3, -2, 1 above. Don't forget to write those arrows above I, j, and k. That's what says they're vectors. So let's start out adding two vectors in that first format that we learned to write it. When we're adding, we combine the numbers in identical positions. So the first number in the first vector, we are going to combine with the first number in the second vector, and so on. So starting out, 2 plus 1 is going to give us 3. Then 3 plus 2 gives us 5. And then 5 plus 1 gives us 6. We've added those identical positioned numbers together, and that is our final solution. Now let's try subtracting. When we subtract, we're going to distribute this minus sign through to the second vector, and that's going to turn it into an addition problem for us. So we're going to keep that first vector just as it is, 2, 3, 5. That minus sign we're going to change to a plus sign, and then our positive 1 is going to become a -1, positive 2, -2, and then our positive 1 becomes a -1 as we distribute. And now we just add these numbers together, combining the numbers in the identical positions. So 2 plus -1 is going to give us 1, 3 plus -2, also 1, and 5 plus -1 is going to give us 4. So subtracting those two vectors gives us 1, 1, 4. Third example, we are going to add two vectors written in that second form with the i's, j's, and k's. We want to be sure to put these vectors in parentheses as we are adding them together to keep the vectors separate. But now as we add, we are going to combine like terms. So we're combining those I vectors, combining the j vectors, and combining the k vectors. So 6i plus 1i is going to give us 7i. -7j minus 3j is going to give us -10j. And then -k plus 3k is going to give us plus 2k. Once again, remembering to write those arrows over our i's, j's, and k's, we have the sum of those two vectors. Now let's try multiplying by a scalar. We're going to take that problem above, and we're going to multiply by a scalar of 3. So our first step is we are going to adding those two vectors together. We already have the solution to that, so I'm just going to copy that from above. 7i minus 10j plus 2k. Again, keeping that in parentheses. And now, with this scalar of 3 that I'm multiplying through, my second step is going to be to distribute the 3. So distributing that through, 3 times 7i is going to be 21i. 3 times -10j is going to be negative 30j. And then 3 times positive 2k is going to be a plus 6k. Let's try another example, subtracting vectors in this form. So, once again, our first step is going to be to distribute the minus through. So I'm going to distribute here, copying that first vector just as it is, 6i minus 7j minus k, and then I'm going to change that minus sign to a plus sign, and then my positive I is going to become a negative I, minus 3j is going to become a plus 3j, and then plus 3k is going to become minus 3k. Second step, I'm going to combine like terms. So now I'm looking at my two i's. I have 6i plus negative 1i, that's going to give me 5i. Then negative 7j plus 3j is going to give me a negative 4j. And then negative k plus a negative 3k is going to give me negative 4k. And now I am done subtracting those two vectors. Last thing I'm going to do is multiply my answer to example 5 by a scalar of negative 2. So negative 2 times 5i minus 4j minus 4k, keeping that vector in parentheses. My first step is going to be to distribute the negative 2 through my whole vector. So negative 2 times 5i is going to give me negative 10i. Negative 2 times negative 4j is going to give me a positive 8j. And then lastly, negative 2 times negative 4k is going to give me a positive 8k. Congratulations, you have just learned how to multiply vectors by scalars as well as add and subtract vectors. We are done with our notes, so thank you for your attention and have a good one.